Hey everyone, God bless you. Thanks a lot for tuning in. My reflection today for this Tech Tuesday is called Car Crazy, the technology of the automobile. And I'd like to reflect with you a little bit to continue our study of how form itself has value and how technological creations are important to evaluate not just in their usage, but also in their very existence, in their very structure, because the form of technology has a tremendous impact upon us. I want you to think with me about the incredible creation of the automobile. You know, the automobile has become absolutely a figment in modern life, especially in the West, especially in America. No country on the face of planet Earth is more in love with the automobile than Americans. There are more cars in America than there are people, which is truly an amazing thing. You know, at the end of the 20th century, or I should rather, it's the end of the 19th century, at the beginning of the 20th century, is when cars really came into existence. In 1896, 1897 or so, cars began to exist, and the creators began to prove that they could create a gas engine that could propel someone comfortably. In 1900, there were 8,000 cars registered in the United States. By 1910, that is one decade later, there weren't 8,000, there were 458,000 registered cars. By 1929, there were 27 million. Today, there are hundreds and hundreds of millions of cars across the landscape from coast to coast in the United States. And cars have had an incredible impact upon the way that Americans think and live. And I am fascinated by this subject, not only because I myself am a suburbanite and have lived in highly concentrated cities, being born and raised in Los Angeles, but Los Angeles itself and California went through a radical metamorphosis with the creation and the popularity of cars. Across the country, transportation went from being horse-driven, and then trains became popular, and then the automobile. And the automobile has become so popular that it has, of course, completely eliminated horses from a normal mode of transportation, and has greatly caused the decline in trains and streetcars. When I was born, Los Angeles had been served for many years by an incredible streetcar called the Red Car, which had tentacles all over the Los Angeles area, all over Southern California, and it was very popular. When the automotive industry exploded and it came to Southern California, they insisted on the removal of the lines of the streetcars so that they could build freeways over where the tracks were. Instead of cars collaborating with the streetcars, automobiles pushed them out, and they were lobbied. The automobile industry lobbied for the elimination of the red car. Ironically, the population has grown so much that cars can't even facilitate the population, and our freeways are all over the landscape here. And now we're, what do you know, laying track for streetcars and metro links. Yes, history is full of its ironies. When the car was first invented, it was presented to the public as an incredible technology, right? Just like the god Thoth presented to King Thamus of Egypt his inventions as the best and the most incredibly helpful things. This is exactly how the manufacturers of the automobile presented the car to the Western world. Let me read to you some of the promises that were made by the inventors of the automobile to their prospective customers. These are promises that if you use the car, if you start driving cars, this is what's going to happen to you. These great things are going to take place. Okay, here are some of the promises. You're going to have increased physical health. You're going to have good exercise. That was mostly centered around the moving of the steering wheel, which used to be quite an endeavor before power steering. Reduced noise compared to the sound of the horses and the carriages. Cleaner streets. Yes, cars were going to produce cleaner streets because you'd have a lot less poop that you'd have to avoid from all the horses. Reduce the strain of urban life. Escape pollution. Now, isn't that an irony? Escape pollution. Reclaim hundreds of millions of U.S. farmland that was used to raise horses in order to provide enough horses for transportation for people. So the car magnates said, look, if you use cars, you're going to be able to have a lot more farm acreage. Save money. You're going to save money. It will reduce class distinctions. It's going to improve romance. That is a promotional marketing piece that was used from the beginning of the automobile industry and is still being used today. I think it's so consistently used because I think it's partially true that they were told, Americans were told at the beginning of the 20th century that if they got cars, their dating life was going to improve drastically and that they were going to men would become gods, veritable gods to women. That's still a big selling point. All of those were the promises that were made. Cars are going to change your life. And certainly cars have. Not in all of the ways that I just read, however. Most of these promises were very short-lived, if they ever came to exist at all. What we've seen, in fact, is that the technology, the very technology of cars, I'm not talking about how you use the car. Now, of course, how you use the car, you can use a car well or you can use a car poorly, for sure. You can drive courteously or you can drive with road rage and be a real hazard to people. You can drive through neighborhoods with your music blasting at 3 a.m. and wake everyone else up, or you can be respectful. Certainly, there are a virtuous and a vice-ridden way to use a car. But the car itself, the actual thing, has a tremendous impact on the human race. Let me just reflect with you a little bit about the impact of the automobile as normative. First, I would say that there's no better picture of what the automobile can do to people, and especially to men, than a little Disney show that was popular back in the day when I was young and had to take driver's education. They made us watch a video called Motor Mania. You can still see it on YouTube. If you haven't seen it, I encourage you to watch it. It features Goofy, and Goofy is presented as a wonderful family man. He's a hardworking family man. His name is Mr. Walker, and he comes out of his house with his suit on, and he smells the flowers, and he kisses his wife goodbye, and he meanders out to his car, and he gets in his car, and he puts the key in, and boom, and as soon as he hears that motor, a metamorphosis, a Jekyll and Hyde metamorphosis takes place to him. And he goes from being Mr. Walker, the genteel Mr. Walker, to Mr. Wheeler. And Mr. Wheeler is crazed. He disrespects everyone. He drives over people on the sidewalk. He smashes into cars and takes off. He's completely self-centered. It was a great cartoon, and it had potency as an instructional aid because it was so understandable, because people knew it was true. Though it was exaggerated, it's absolutely true. The very structure of the car encourages a dehumanization, a depersonalization of human experience. The car is this massive steel box. It hides the face of the traveler much more than does riding on a horse or a carriage, where you pass someone, you can actually see who they are. In a car, especially cars that have tinted windows, which are very, very popular, especially in sunny areas like Southern California, you're driving a vehicle and no one knows really who's in there. You're only identified by a number. It's like being in prison. You're only identified by a number on your license plate. And for many in SoCal, that's only on the back, even though it's illegal not to have a front license plate. The consequences of this is a tremendous increase of vice. People are not restrained by being identified personally. Anyway, so the first is the impact simply on the human person. And that impact does lead and has historically led to all sorts of car crime, especially to the pathology of road rage, which is a massive epidemic wherever highly congested driving takes place. And it leads to very, very large numbers of death. There's also the change to the very layout of our societies, the very layout of cities. The creation of suburbia was a direct result of the making of freeways and the invention of the automobile. People used to have to live close together, or at least close enough to be able to ride into markets. Now people can live 20, 30 miles outside of town and be in 20 minutes. They get in their car and boom, they drive to where they are. The creation of large stores, big box stores that serve millions and millions of people who drive into that center because they have cars. This is a result of the car. It's also led to the alteration of neighborhoods and the change in construction of typical architecture for home, domestic architecture. So when I was growing up, the common placement of a garage was behind the home. You would have a driveway that would go down the side of the house and you would park behind because garages are notoriously ugly and grotesque. And now houses are built in suburbia with the garages as the main focal point. These ugly, grotesque garages are placed in the front, and at the same time that happened, front porches were removed. So older houses have porches out front because people would sit outside and have a drink in the evening or a smoke and talk to each other and wave to their neighbors who were walking by. Today, they've built instead entertainment centers in their living rooms, and we don't go outside at all. We come in, we sit down and plop in front of the television, and people look at our cars and our garages when they drive by. I'll leave it to you to evaluate which is the more human architecture, which is the more uplifting and edifying architecture. But this is a direct response to the full-blown embrace of car living as a normative technology. One of the most incorrect promises of the early days of the automobile industry is that it would be cheaper than having a horse. And that has proved absolutely untrue. The amount of money that a typical family spends on a car, on its registration, on its being gassed, on its insurance, is just atrocious, just absolutely atrocious. And especially because most families feel that they need multiple cars. It becomes usually after a house payment, the most burdensome maintenance in the monthly budget of a family. So it's absolutely burdened people financially. Escaping pollution, that's an irony. In fact, the environment has been deeply impacted by the full-blown embrace of the car and the burning of fossil fuels. When I grew up in Los Angeles, even though there were only about half as many people there as there are now, some 22 million people in Southern California now, we had many, many days in school in which we couldn't play outside. We couldn't exercise during PE class. We had to sit down in the gym floor and do homework because they were smog days. It was the invention of a new technology called the catalytic converter, which took the particulate matter down significantly in the car pollution and didn't hurt the lungs of people in these highly concentrated urban centers. But for years, pollution just was a major, major problem. Horses stunk for sure and caused a form of pollution, but far, far less than automobiles. Also, there's all sorts of mental health consequences. Um, having a car is not like having a new suit. Having a car is a massive alteration in your life. And for people who live in cities, I really would encourage you, if you have the opportunity to have a sabbatical or go on an extended vacation and never get behind a car, just watch what will happen to you. When I spent a significant amount of time when I was working on my PhD in Northern England, in Durham, I didn't drive a car or even get in a car for months and months and months. And wow, did I feel better. And frankly, I've always been someone who has loved driving and loved cars. The impact upon the mental state and the physical state of a person who has to drive a lot is really deeply impactful, deeply impactful. The average person in urban areas in the United States spend 101 minutes a day driving. That is a lot of time. That is a lot of time. With this technology, dear ones, with this new way of life, this automotive way of life, it's very, very important for us to learn to sanctify it, to learn how, in fact, to best utilize this technology if we're going to continue to use it, and for most people it's inescapable. How do you save your soul behind the wheel? In fact, I did a series once. It's available on P&P. It's called Drive, How to Save Your Soul in Traffic. It's 4 one-hour lectures on how to turn your driving experience into something that facilitates your salvation. I want to encourage you to check it out on P&P. Learn about car virtue and car vice, about car courtesy and how to avoid road rage, how to turn your car into a prayer cell or into a study library, a little study cubicle for yourself. There is a way not to be car crazy, but to be able to use this technology for the better. Technology itself greatly impacts us, and the use of technology is important too, and I would suggest that you check it out. Drive, How to Save Your Soul in Traffic. God be with you, dear ones.